Well, good morning, Calvary. My name is Daniel Sweet. I'm the pastor here. Glad that all of you are here and worship with us. We believe that God meets us here when we come together as a body. We believe that the Spirit of God inhabits His people, believers in Christ, and so the Lord is here with us, and we are hoping and praying that God speaks to all of us. If you are new, thank you for being in worship with us. We're glad that you're here. Take some time to fill that card out in front of you. That blue card will help you get connected if you'd like some more information about the church. We're in part 2 of a series called Stars, and we're looking at stars, celebrities, if you will, in the scriptures. And the last time we did this series, we looked at the life of Samson in great detail. And this is the second part where we're looking at the life of Joseph in great detail. Today, the scriptures are up on the screen, but I'm going to reference back a couple times, and they won't be at a few places. So you'll need to be in the book of Genesis, chapter 37, with one of these old-fashioned hard copies right here like this, or perhaps you have your phone or tablet or something like that. You can pull out the scriptures there. Genesis chapter 37. What I want to do to start us off is look at our narrative today, the story of Joseph in its entirety, okay? This particular place where we'll be looking. So let's take a look at that. Now, his brothers, that's Joseph's brothers, went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. Now, last week, we looked at how Joseph had these dreams and how God leveraged those dreams, was using those dreams. And if you want to catch up, that's Genesis 37, 1 through 11. That's where we were at last week. And so here we are now. His brothers, there's a lot of hostility between Joseph and his brothers. They go to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel, that's Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to him, "Here I am." And so dad tells his youngest son, "Go find your brothers, find out what they're up to, give me a report." And so he said to them, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where they are pasturing the flock." And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, 'Let us go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. They said they saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Remember when I said there was some problems between Joseph and his brothers? I might have undersold that just a little bit. There were some major problems. This is not good. And they said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Come now, let us kill him and throw him in to one of the pits or wells or cisterns. Then we will say that a fierce animal has devoured him, and we will see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into the pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him. Then he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to their father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore. And they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty. There was no water in it. And they sat down to eat. And looking up, they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. And they, with their camels bearing gum, balm, myrrh, on their way to take it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother. Oh, thank you so much, Joseph. You're so nice. Our own flesh. And his brothers listened to him. The Midianites and the Ishmaelites and the Midianites, that's interchangeable. The traders were passing by, and they drew Joseph up. They lifted him out of the pit, and they sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. They took Joseph to Egypt. When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe, they slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify if it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph, without doubt, has been torn to pieces." And then Jacob tore his garments and put on sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted and said, "No, I shall go down to Sheol," or the grave, "to my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Midianites had sold him to Egypt, to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. Well, what a messed up family. These folks got some. You thought maybe you came from a bad family. You thought maybe you had it rough, the family you grew up with. Sometimes I think that. Nothing compared to Jacob and his 12 boys. At this point, it's still just 11, with Joseph being the youngest. You know, I shouldn't have to tell anyone here this, but it is true, and it is something we ought to talk about. Living in this sin-fallen world, in this broken world of ours, bad stuff happens. Horrible things happen. These sort of things make us question, they make us doubt. Oftentimes, they can even get us pretty angry. And nothing upsets us quite to the same degree when innocent people suffer. And truly, even more so, when innocent people suffer at the hands of wicked people. We can look throughout history and we can find example after example of when there were folks who didn't do anything wrong, and yet horrible things happen to them at the hands of other people, and it just sort of fires us up, and it ought to. There's an incredible injustice about such a thing. And that is certainly what is going on here in the life of this man named Joseph, who is but 17 years old. We know that from verses 1 through 11. And this event that we just read, 12 through the end of the chapter, seems to be happening right after that or close to it. Just a young man, had done nothing wrong, yet is experiencing some of the most devastating betrayal, pain, and suffering a person could imagine. Which brings us to our first principle, and something we all need to look at and think about quite a bit. And it's this: just because you do right does not mean that things will go right. This principle for Christian people is what separates the men from the boys, the women from the girls. You see what I'm saying? Like this is real gut check stuff right here. There's a lot of folks that believe and think, I'm doing right, so everything should go right. I don't know who fed you that spoonful of sugar, but it is a lie. It is not true. You can do right. You can do everything right. That does not mean that everything is going to go right. Because, folks, we live in a broken world, a sin-fallen world. Our bodies are broken. Our consciences are broken. Where nature itself is out to get us, our bodies are out to get us. There's sin and wickedness in our own hearts and in the hearts of everyone around us. We can make all the right decisions. We can do all of that. Doesn't mean everything is going to go right. Here, I'll show you. Now, his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem. I told you guys this family was all kinds of messed up. Last week, we talked about how the oldest of the 11 sons was Reuben, and how he had actually did something pretty gross and had an affair and slept with his stepmom, okay? One of Jacob's 4 wives. Of course, that in and of itself is a problem. And so you can just see how the problems are piling up. And Reuben, as a grown adult, did a horrible thing, and his father sort of took his will and said, yeah, I don't think you're getting any of the inheritance, my man, for that. Shechem is an interesting place because it's where son number 2 and son number 3, Levi and Simeon, or maybe it's Simeon and Levi. I forget. You can look that up. Where these 2 sons of Jacob, they were camping. This is many years before this event where we're at now. And Shechem, the prince of Shechem, it was a city, and then his name was Shechem, this young man, raped the sister of Levi and Simeon. And Levi and Simeon, if you're familiar, they went into Shechem, they had a big town hall meeting, and they talked to all the men. They said, oh yeah, your leader, he raped our sister. That's no good. I tell you what, why don't all you fellas in the whole city, every one of you, get circumcised just like us? But you got to get circumcised just like us. And if you do, we'll trade with you. You can marry our women, we can marry your women, and we'll build, we'll have a community here, and it'll be great. And all the men of Shechem agreed. And later that evening, or perhaps the next evening, you can look, Levi and Simeon went to every tent, every house, and they slit the throat of every man. Now, what they did was pretty horrible. What Shechem did, the prince of Shechem, what he did was awful. And quite honestly, in that day and age, he deserved it. But that does not mean every man in that city deserved it. They shed buckets of innocent blood while the men of Shechem were recovering from their wounds. And this made Jacob cross their name out of the will too, because his sons were so incredibly violent. And now, many years later, they're out to pasture their father's flock. And of all the places on planet Earth they could go, they go to Shechem. What in the world would take them back there? I submit to you, it's because these 10 brothers were looking to party, get wild, and get into all kinds of trouble. Because that's the kind of men they were. There is this image and this picture of folks in the Bible that are just clean and pretty and frail and this and that. Oh no. The men of Israel, the tribes of Israel, they were roughnecks. It was more like a Western. That's how these men were. They were gritty. They were rugged. They probably spoke with not kind words. They were the kind of folks, honestly, the foundation of God's people were the kind of people you didn't want to meet in a back alley. Because here they are, taking all of their flocks. This is a lot of sheep. Jacob was a very wealthy man. And they're going to Shechem, and they're going to stay. They're not going to be there for a little while. And they're going to party, and they're going to get wild, and they're going to get into all sorts of trouble. Is everybody kind of with me on that? That's what's going on. So for that reason, Dad said, Joseph, go check on them. I heard they're going to Shechem. I don't rightly like that. This is where Shechem is. Hebron, where they lived, all the way to the south. Jerusalem was not even Jerusalem yet during these days. It was a city, but it wasn't called Jerusalem. You see Hebron way to the south, south of the Dead Sea, way far desert, arid. They went to Shechem in the Jordan Valley, in the middle part of the country. Now, you and I could get in a car and we could drive from Hebron to Shechem in maybe an hour or an hour and a half. But for being on foot, this was a long ways away from home. And they went there on purpose. And so they are far out of their element. And Israel, that's their dad, that's Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem?" I bet his red flag went up. That's the word I got. I don't like that. They are getting in trouble. I remember what happened the last time they were there. "Come, I will send you to them." And what did Joseph say? "No, Dad. No, I'm not going to Shechem. I'm not going to that. I know what my brothers are up to. I don't want any part of that." Is that what Joseph said? No, he said, "You bet, Pops. Here I am. I am at your mercy. I will go." And so he said to them, "Go. Go now. See if it is well with your brothers and with the flock." He's probably thinking, they're going to take us to the poorhouse going out there. Who knows what they're doing with all of our sheep? That's expensive. It was a family business. "And bring me word." And so he sent them from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Joseph went all by himself on foot, wandering around, looking for his rebellious, happy to party brothers. And a man found him wandering in the fields. I mean, he is diligently looking around for them. "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers." I don't know about you. I probably would have given up. He's looking around, but he had a mission. He had a job. He's out to complete it, to fulfill it. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" The man said, "Oh, they've gone away. They're not here anymore. I heard them say, let's go to Dothan." Dothan is like close to Shechem. Dothan literally means two wells, two pits, two cisterns. Same word. It's not even a town. It is not even inhabited. It's just a little landmark outside by Shechem. And I heard them say, let's go to Dothan. They would have been hard to miss, 10 rowdy brothers with a bunch of sheep. So Joseph went after his brothers and found them at Dothan. You can do the Father's will, just like Joseph. Innocent, didn't do anything wrong. He's just obeying orders. He's being a loyal son. He's a hardworking son. He didn't give up. He pressed on. He couldn't find his brothers, but he said, I got to find them. I got to find word. He knew what their brothers were probably up to. He knew their character. He did it anyway. He checked all the boxes on the list. Joseph was 17 years old, yet he had way more integrity than any other's brothers. Most of them are grown men with families. He did everything right. He's not out of line at any place here. Yet, we know the rest of the story. There is trouble heading his way. You can do everything right. That doesn't mean everything's going to go right in your life. You follow Jesus? Good. You try to obey his word? Amazing. You serve, you worship him, you give. You're a part of his mission. You're a part of his plan. You care about the things of God. Praise God for that. It could still go south on you quick. Will you still follow him then? Will you still be faithful when your plans don't pan out? Will you still serve him, worship him, honor him when the worst possible scenario plays out in your life? You see, that's real discipleship. That's real worship. That's really following. And we get hung up in the church today. There's a lot of folks, I'm doing the right thing, but the right thing didn't happen, so I'm checking out. Listen, that ain't what it means to be a Christ follower. That is not the definition of a Christian. That is not the definition of discipleship. It is when things are at rock bottom, unbelievably hard, when we come up against the most intense suffering and we look at our lives and we say, well, I did everything right. And you probably did. But we live in a sin-fallen world. That doesn't mean everything's going to work out right. Just look at the life of Joseph. It's absolutely true. Will we still follow him? You can be the safest driver in the world. Somebody could still hit you. You could be the kindest, nicest person around to other people around you, and people could still slander your name. You could be the most honest person around who does everything by the book because you want to be honest, you want to do things right, and you could still be cheated. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, that's how life is. Guess what? Jesus knows all too well about what Joseph is fixing to go through. He knows all too well about what it's like to be us, to live here and to do right, but not everything go right. Do you see how Joseph is this foreshadow, this type of Messiah? Because this is how the Messiah will be treated. All Jesus was doing is going out looking for his brothers, doing the will of the Father. And what he got in return was the worst suffering imaginable that any person has ever gone through. So why in the world does it work out like this? Why in the world does it work out that even though we do right, not everything goes right? Well, it's because the enemy is planning and plotting unimaginable evil, things we can't even figure. The enemy is coming at every one of us here. The enemy hates you. He hates you. If you're a human being, if you bear the image of God, he hates that about you. And he is coming to destroy you. He's planning, he's plotting, he's scheming to get you to fall, to hurt you, to bring you down, to ruin your testimony. Whatever it is, whatever walk of life you come from, whatever social economic status, whatever part of the world a person lives in, the enemy is planning and plotting to destroy them. It doesn't matter what continent a person lives on, what sort of family it does not matter. The enemy hates the image of God in human beings, and he's coming after us in some form or fashion, and even using others to hurt others. Oh my goodness. And we see it being played out in the life of Joseph. This is where you'll need your Bible. Notice the plots of the enemy. I'm breaking it down into 3 plots. I'll try to be brief. Plot number 1 comes in verses 18 through 24. So I'll give you a second to turn there, to scroll there, whatever it is. Genesis 37, 18 through 24. Now we read this, so I'm just going to sort of review, and I hope that you're following along to some degree, taking a look at it. He is on his way to this little outpost in the middle of the nowhere called Dothan, this place of 2 cisterns. And it says, as he approached, they conspired against him. That's a plot. Against him to kill him, to take his life. They make fun of him. Here comes that dreamer. Remember, he had the dreams. They're making fun of him. They're mocking him. He's not there yet, but they're still making fun of him. Come now, let us kill him and throw him into the pits. Except they ain't playing around. They're not making that up. They intend to do this. No one's around. Here is a pit. Let's slit his throat, take his jacket, throw him in there. That'll be the last of him. And we'll take the jacket home to Dad, and we'll say he got torn apart by a wild animal, a lion, a bear, whatever. And those things were around in Israel at that time. But Reuben, so this is the first plot. And Reuben, the oldest brother, comes along. Don't think Reuben is doing Joseph any favors at all, because he's not. Reuben believes that he can manage sin, and you can't. He thinks that you can, but you cannot. Reuben is the oldest. He has the most authority out of anybody there. Reuben could have easily have said, fellas, stop. We're not killing him. Cut it out. End of story. You're going to have to go through me and kill me if you want to kill him. Is that what y'all want to do? Who would agree that's what Reuben should have done? Yeah. This would have been the wise thing, even though it may have cost him his life, and it would have been the courageous thing. But that's not what he did. He thought he could manage evil and sin, and you cannot manage your sin or any sin. The thing to do is simply to stand against it on the foundation of Scripture and truth, to stand against evil and wickedness and sin, whether it's from someone else or whether even if it's coming from your own heart. You cannot negotiate and manage sin. Well, I'll just do this for a little while, and then I'll tell this lie, and then I'll do this, and I'll get out of this mess. You cannot manage sin. You cannot do it. Reuben thought you could. So he came up with this plan. Okay, everybody, we're not going to just slit his throat and throw him in the pit, guys. Let's just throw him in the pit and leave him there, and he'll die all on his own, and then we'll be innocent. But that's the lie. That's how sin works. We lie about what sin actually does, and that's what Reuben thought would, hey, if we just throw him in there, he'll eventually die, and then we won't be guilty. Guys, let's do that. That's a better idea. And then he has this little side plan. I'll come back later when no one's looking, and I'll haul him out of there. I'll take him back to dad, and everybody will be happy. No, you cannot play around with sin and evil that way. You cannot manage it. You cannot negotiate with it. That's what Reuben's trying to do. And Jesus knew all too well what happens as he is the Messiah, and Joseph is this foreshadow of. He knew all too well what happens when people try to pull this same garbage with him, because people did this. Gamaliel, one of the greatest Jewish rabbis, said, we don't need to kill this man. If he's not really the Messiah, it'll all come to... And instead of just being bold and brave and standing up against sin, no one did that in Jesus' life. There's this incredible correlation between Joseph and the Lord. Plot number 2, 25 through 28, you can take a look at it. But see, Reuben is not very smart. He's the oldest brother, but he doesn't exercise his authority, and I'm telling you, he's a little dull in the head. But Judah's the real leader here. I'm not saying he's a good leader, but he's the leader. You ever meet somebody that's a really influential, like super influential? It's just the wrong kind of influential. You know someone like that? Yeah, I bet you probably do. That's Judah. He had all the influence with his brothers. Reuben had none. Judah had all the influence, and Judah was smart. Except he's not using it for good reasons. And so Reuben goes away. He runs an errand, which is not smart, knowing that all your brothers want him dead. And so as he comes along, as the merchants come along, Judah believes that he can profit from evil and sin. Oh, he gets another idea. By the way, I can't prove this in the text, but I think it was originally Judah who said, hey, let's kill him. Let's throw him in the pit. Let's slit his throat. I can't prove that because it just seems like that was the consensus among all of them. But reading on in the passage, seeing how Judah says, hey, I got a better idea, guys. Let's sell him as a slave. We'll split the money, and we kill two birds with one stone. He's gone. He's out of our life, and we get some cash. And so I think Judah's like he's taking control over this whole thing. But he believes that he could profit from sin, that this evil could do him some good. Can good ever come from sin? Can good ever come from evil? It may seem like that way for a bit. Let's be honest. Sin can be boatloads of fun. Anybody want to say amen to that? I mean, it can be. Don't say amen to that. But it can be. Sin can be a blast, man. It can be a party. It can be awesome. It can be even temporarily fulfilling. Just ask the 10 brothers who went to Shechem to carouse and do whatever. They were having a lot of fun. It was probably fun for them to get revenge, or not revenge like Joseph did anything wrong, but to just mistreat their brother. They probably thought it was fun. But it's not lasting. It's not fulfilling. There's no blessing involved. But a lot of people think that they can negotiate with sin and profit from it. And some do profit from it temporarily. Some may profit from it their entire time here on this planet, here on earth. But even we know that's not forever. Little tidbit of information, little Bible study, Sunday school. If you take Judah's name, which means Yahweh be praised, and you translate it from the Hebrew, Judah, into Greek, it comes out as Judas. Judas. Very popular Jewish name. I find it incredibly remarkable how Judas is betraying, selling his brother, Judas. And if we just fast forward, we find out that there was another man, a disciple, one of 12, who thought that he could profit from sin by betraying his Lord for a whole bunch of silver, no less. If you don't see that parallel, that Jesus knows all too well what it's like for people to try to profit from sin. He knows what it's like to be on the receiving end of these things, just like Joseph knew. The third plot is then hatched, where they go back to their father, 29 through 35. They get the coat of many colors. They dip it in goat's blood, and they give it to Jacob. And I got to be honest with you, it's not as if there's a whole lot of compassion in their voice, quite honestly. I don't know if you caught that or not. What verse would that be? Where they go to their brother. Somebody help me out. They dip it in blood. Oh, verse 32, thank you. They go to their dad. They are deceiving Jacob. Remember, Jacob deceived his father. Now it's coming back around, isn't it? The generational curse kind of thing. You can see all this playing out in the scriptures. But notice how cold and calloused they all are. We don't know who exactly is speaking. But they said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe, not our brother's robe, but your son's robe or not." How? Man, guys, doing great on the compassion department, aren't you? Because they don't care. They're full of hatred and violence. And honestly, they don't really care for their father either. There's just sort of this dehumanizing of Joseph. Isn't that what you'd have to do to throw a man in a pit and to sell him off as a slave? Because that's what they did. And now they're covering the whole thing up as if he was a random accident by a lion or some kind of thing. We don't know. And that's the third plot. But notice the main character in this third plot is Jacob. Jacob buys the lie. He gives up all hope in the face of evil. Evil is right there, and he's been deceived by it. I'm not saying he's done anything wrong here. But his sons certainly have by deceiving him. And he bites in to hopeless and bitterness and depression with everything that he has. Notice what Jacob does. Then Jacob tore his garments as one would expect of a father. He put on sackcloth on his loins, and he mourned for a son many days, as one would expect for a father who loves their son. But notice his words. All his sons and daughters rose up to comfort him. Of course, they are all deceiving him. But he refused to be comforted. That's the important thing. There was no hope left. He gave up. He lost something, and he's reveling and embracing the lost. No, I shall go down to the grave to my son mourning. And his father kept mourning him. In other words, this is a classic case of depression. All depression stems from loss. And Jacob, he doesn't want to find his new normal. He doesn't want to heal. He wants this wound in his heart to stay open, and it does for many, many years, and that's depression. I'm sure you've been there. I'm sure you've dealt with that. We all have, to some degree, and this is the third plot. And I'm telling you, there is hope. There is a place of healing. Because in the midst of the enemy plotting and planning to take Joseph out, just like he plans and plots to take us out, God is working out redemption in seemingly unexpected ways. Because while all of that garbage is going on, while all the planning and the plotting and the deception is happening, there's a meanwhile. A meanwhile. The darkest moments of your life, when you get bad news from the doctor, when you're mistreated by someone, when something doesn't go your way, when it seems like there's something in your life that you could never overcome, there's a meanwhile. While all the bad stuff is going, while all the junk is playing out, God is working out a meanwhile. Meanwhile, while the 10 brothers were deceiving their father and his father descends into hopelessness and all of the brothers are laughing about it and having a good time, that they've got away with the whole thing, that they hated and wanted to kill and did all of these horrible things and mistreated their brother. All in the meanwhile, the Midianites. That's not a good thing, Midianites. He was sold. That's worse. That's also bad. To Egypt, no less, to a man named Potiphar, who's an officer of Pharaoh. Meanwhile, it gets worse. But God is working in unexpected ways, a story of redemption. I'm here to tell you, Calvary Church, a redemption story brings God glory. When God is working out redemption in your life, when it seems like, Pastor, it's pretty darn hopeless right now. You don't know the half of what I've been through. I don't. You don't know the pain that I've had to experience. No, I don't. You don't know the betrayal and the struggle and the dark nights and the tears shed. No. But I just know somehow in all of that, there's a meanwhile. And God has been moving pieces around to set something up for a redemption story. So will you choose to be courageous, like Reuben was not? Will you choose to be loyal, like Judah was not? Will you choose to be faithful and to be hopeful, like Jacob was not?